Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. What brings you joy and a sense of gratitude these days? Last week in our adult study, we talked about the distinction between happiness and joy. Happiness is generally more surface level. Joy is deeper and can be experienced even when our circumstances aren't what we would hope. Joy often comes by being centered in a life and purpose that you know to be right and good, when you feel you have a calling connected to your faith and values. And though you may face hardship and challenges along the way, you can also experience a deep sense of gratitude and joy. Joy is connected to living our lives in the service of others. I heard a pastor who was present at a peaceful protest in Chicago this past week speak about an incredible spirit of love and grace and even gratitude that was among those gathered, even though they were facing very difficult circumstances and being impacted physically by exercising their constitutional right to assemble and speak on behalf of their neighbors. Faith and love have the ability to inspire gratitude and joy no matter the place and time. In an entirely different era, over 100 years ago, Lutherans from Minnesota began an outreach to the Kurdish people in the area of Turkey and Iran. With a mindset of mission and service, two professors from Luther Seminary in St. Paul at the time had gone over to learn more about them and assess what kinds of needs they had. And they decided to begin an outreach and formed what was then called the Lutheran Orient Mission Society, now called Lutheran Mideast Development. The purpose, they stated in 1910, was to further Lutheran work in Persia and Turkish Kurdistan by attending to the spiritual and physical needs of the local people. Kurds still today don't have much of a country of their own. They live interspersed between Turkey, Iraq, and Iran, and there's a mix of both Christian and Muslim. These leaders found that the Kurdish people at that time had no health care, and there were many orphans, along with hunger, persecution, and violence. They helped women make a living with their talents, gave children an education, and helped put the spoken Kurdish language into a written language, developing the Kurdish alphabet, lexicon, and grammar, and producing textbooks, newspapers, hymnals, and even the New Testament. In the process, they tore down walls and built bridges between the Christians and Muslims in the area. The heart of the missionaries was one of compassion. Well over 100 years later, they are still remembered at large in the society, in film, in print, and on street signs. They've not stopped thanking them for everything they did. Despite the good they did, it wasn't easy work. So why would Christians reach out to people who are foreigners and work for their well-being? We find answers to that question throughout Jesus' ministry, but today's gospel from Luke 17 about the healing of 10 men, 10 lepers, helps us understand what builds gratitude and joy. We learn in this story that Jesus is at a border. It's between Galilee and Samaria. It's the dividing line between Jews and Samaritans. And we know from other passages like the Good Samaritan that there was animosity between these two peoples. Borders can be tense. For Jews, the borders represented the line between themselves and people who were spiritually unclean, people they were to keep their distance from whenever possible. But Jesus takes his disciples to this place anyway. And it's there that they encounter the 10 with leprosy or a similar skin disease. The transliteration of the Greek word is actually leper, but there's some dispute about whether what was considered leprosy at that time is technically what we consider medically to be leprosy today, but it was a skin disease. And they called out to Jesus for mercy. It was apparently only in these borderlands where they found space to live. And when they see Jesus, they appear to know that he's capable of healing. In Luke's telling, Jesus doesn't even perform any specific healing ritual. He doesn't say, "You've been healed," or lay hands on them. He simply tells them, "Go and show yourself to the priests." And as they go, they discover they've been made clean. This refers not only to a physical resolution to their condition, but a spiritual resolution as well. Going to the priest was the spiritual ritual set up for a person with a skin disease to be readmitted to society. Otherwise, they had to stay at the sidelines of society. The priest would examine them. It was part of their duty to go to the priest. So as the 10 are leaving to see those priests, Luke says they were all made clean, all of them, but one returns. And why? There's really only one thing you need to know about this man that's different. It's the only detail we're given in the story. He's unlike the other 9. He's a Samaritan. He's a foreigner. And he doesn't follow the same purity laws and rituals. In all likelihood, he doesn't have a priest to go see. A Jewish priest wouldn't welcome him. He has nowhere else to go. He has no duties to fulfill. He's a free man. So where does he go now? He returns to Jesus and thanks him. It's the only natural response. He has the time and space now in his life to express gratitude. Jesus wonders where the other 9 are. Why didn't they return to give thanks? It would be easy to hear his response as an indictment of the other 9, but that's odd since they're actually doing what Jesus told them to do. But Jesus is making a point. See the difference? The irony is that the foreigner, the one who's not bound by all the codes and rituals, is actually free for true devotion. The story reminds me of the story of Mary and Martha when they host Jesus in their home. Martha is preoccupied with all the duties of hosting while Mary feels free to engage in relationship with Jesus. What the 9 do isn't wrong. They do what Jesus tells them, and in fact, it's in responding to what Jesus did and beginning on their way to the temple that they find themselves clean. But they miss out on the deeper reality before them. They have the opportunity to thank Jesus, but instead they're focused on fulfilling requirements, duties, and social obligations only. The man's gratitude follows from the grace shown to him by Jesus. His healing transforms him for a new life, not only of physical well-being, but for his re-entry into community and social connection. Grace in the form of healing opens up a sphere of freedom and gratitude. It opens up a new future of possibilities, and in that new space, it's not only the 10 who are made clean and are transformed, but the people around them and the communities where they come from and their relationships. It has a cascading effect. Grace begets grace. One person's physical healing has ripple effects in the community. 10 people become able to contribute to their communities and the lives of others again. Of course, what Jesus did was unusual, not only because of his apparent miraculous powers, but physical disease was very often linked to spiritual purity. It was seen as a sign that there was something else wrong with you as well. That's why they're sent to the priest to be proclaimed clean again and no longer shunned. And without Jesus there, they would have been shunned and pushed back to the margins of community out of fear and judgment to wander the borderlands again. Instead, Jesus chooses grace. Humans still often assign inner deficiencies to outward appearances. If someone behaves differently, people assume an inner weakness or flaw. The same if someone is poor, or like the Samaritan in the story, a foreigner. Someone who looks different must be bad somehow because they do things differently. They have different customs. It's sad that this human instinct still remains. We see it playing out every day. In the face of the other, we choose to shun and even punish. This is the response of fear and judgment. This creates a sphere of increasing fear and suffering. And so we have the same choice as Jesus today, and along with it, a question. Will we work to expand a sphere of grace, love, and joy, or one of fear, punishment, and violence? It saddens me that so many who want to be religious and faithful seem not to have encountered the grace of God, so that we can see so clearly in the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus. Or perhaps they don't yet trust God's grace for them, and that's why they take up a posture of judgment towards others, because they experience it themselves. These neighbors of ours are in need of God's healing grace like us. To be sure, there is a place for law and good order to restrain wrongdoing and ensure justice, but not when those with responsibility use this authority to actually expand wrongdoing and injustice. And so we too live in a kind of borderlands between love and fear and grace and judgment in our world today. It's disorienting. But when our neighbors near or far are experiencing hunger, harm, persecution, or violence, we find ourselves called to accompany them and support them. Like those two professors over 100 years ago that left Minnesota or for Kurdistan, or for the many other Christians who walk into spheres where fear dominates today, even closer to home. We need Jesus to come into our own borderlands. We know that where Jesus walks, healing and gratitude are made possible again. And so we're called to go into all the world, wherever it takes us, to fulfill the commission of our baptisms. Let your light so shine before others that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. Maybe like you, I often feel inadequate in the face of the great divisions and challenges that surround us throughout life. But the good news is that the light we bring is not our own. It's the light of Christ that has come into the world as a word of hope, grace, and love. We simply hold it for this time and serve as witnesses. One by one, we extend the light of God's healing grace into the world so that God's joy may be in us and everyone. In doing so, we glorify not any broken vision of human domination and judgment, but we glorify the one who shows us the way of healing, compassion, and reconciliation. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.